The Minnesota Vikings have had so many hyped up youngsters in camp, and on Saturday, we're going to find out just how real that all is.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. And today on the show, this is the last time you and I get to talk before the Vikings play a real-life football game in real-life football pads. Won't count for anything, but we'll have something to chew on, something to analyze for the rest of next week. While I'm on that topic next week, I'll be out of town, so I'll be doing the travel thing. So if the audio gets a little screwy, or of course the background won't sound exactly the same as you maybe will be used to it sounding, I'll do my best on all of that, but we'll get through it all together. But there will still be shows every single week, and we will do that throughout the season. Really excited for that. So in this first preseason game, the attitude I feel like going into it for me is really focused on the other 88 guys on the roster that aren't JJ McCarthy and Kyler Murray. Obviously, there's been so much focus on those guys, and the quarterback battle is now called. It's over. Competition's done. Kyler Murray wins it. He's the guy. And I'm sure still a vast majority of the coverage in the mainstream world of media is going to cover how Kyler did, how JJ did, and the prognosis for the Vikings from that lens. Sure, that's all totally valid. But I think we have an opportunity here to focus on some of the stuff that hasn't gotten as much love. And I've gotten some complaints that hey, I haven't heard about the O-line. I haven't heard about the corners. I haven't heard about any of this. And I'm with you. I haven't either. I mean, the camp notebooks will sometimes say, oh, well, they made a play here. So-and-so made a play here. I'm about to talk about some of the young players that have stacked days and made plays and kind of been constantly demanding mention with their play. But ultimately, it is all played second fiddle to what's going on in the quarterback room. Now in the preseason, I am no longer restricted, right? I've been playing with a hand tied behind my back, where I have been relying on what other people write, and therefore I am beholden to what other people care about. And the vast majority of media is going to be beholden to what gets all the attention, which is going to be the QB battle. So it's going to dominate everything. And now, thankfully, we no longer have to do that. So today, let me throw out some of these hype trains. And all of the preseason game is going to tell us what's real. The big one to me, there's two to me that stand out the most. And then there's a couple that I've noticed in clips, but obviously that's too small a sample to draw a conclusion that they've had a good camp. And I haven't heard a peep one way or another. But the ones that have really become the sort of secondary headlines of camp after the QB battle are Tai Felton and Chuck Demmings. Tai Felton has stacked a bunch of really cool plays. He's on a bunch of highlights. He's on the YouTube shorts that the Vikings put out and the Twitter clips and stuff. And there's been a lot of plays. But is that real? Right? I can probably take for granted his special teams impact, which makes it really difficult to construct a 53-man roster without him. Which, if it weren't for that special teams impact, by the way, that would totally be up for grabs, because he was basically a non-factor as a wide receiver last year, outside of a little bit of garbage time. And if he didn't have a special teams impact, you'd be looking at him like you might look at a Chaz Surratt. And Chaz Surratt, by the way, who was a third-round pick in 2021, had a special teams impact, still got cut in the 2022 offseason. But similarly, you had Wyatt Davis, you had Kellen Mond, all those third-round picks that it didn't happen, and you're looking maybe at the same situation, but not if Tai Felton goes and blows up camp, which it sounds like he's been doing. So that's awesome. And it seems like he's a shoo-in for that wide receiver 4 spot. Some people even see him maybe overtaking Jawan Jennings as wide receiver 3. That hasn't happened. At least it wasn't that way on the depth chart, the unofficial depth chart they released. And it doesn't seem like it's been that way with first team rep distribution or anything like that. But hey, that's the kind of thing that could maybe manifest, halfway through the season as, he makes a couple plays as a rotational guy and you go, man, we got to get this guy more reps. And suddenly he's out snapping, and maybe it goes that way. But before we get, that's me getting way ahead of myself. I'm getting way out over my skis there. Because first, I want to see him do it. Because it's one thing to get a bunch of highlight catches, right? He had that really cool red zone catch on like the second day in the end zone, like the second day of camp, had this really cool like OBJ style, like, hand outstretched, catch in the end zone, get 2 feet down. And, a couple of other like long plays. Some of these are 7-on-7 though. Some of these are in shorts. Some of these are in 1-on-1s where they're not allowed to touch you, right? Like there's all kinds of caveats to playing well in camp. And what we perceive to be playing well in camp versus what is actually showing improvement in camp. Is he getting more separation? And I haven't really seen anything about that one way or another. And I would love to be able to look at a video, but that's been so restricted. So when we get to the preseason, I'm going to be able to watch a whole game's worth of Tai Felton routes, or at least like a preseason game's worth. So maybe a quarter or two for the second team. By the way, in terms of like how much we're going to see, I would guess that we get like 2 drives out of Kyler Murray, maybe a full quarter or something like that. And the ones that it might be 1 drive like it was with Sam Darnold a couple of years ago. It's like 1 drive and then we put it down. I think it was that way with JJ McCarthy as the starter last year too. And then you get like a heavy dose of the 2s in the first game. So that would be Tai Felton. He's with the 2s. He's a second team receiver. And that means a big, nice, heavy dose of Tai Felton. So is he going to get separation? Is he running routes better? Is he showing a lot more nuance? Because Tai Felton, to me, last year, the reason he wasn't a factor at wide receiver wasn't just that a guy like Jalen Naylor was, playing so unbelievably well that we just couldn't bother. We just couldn't possibly fathom taking him out, right? Jalen Naylor was playing great ball. But if there was another good young player, he would have gotten into the rotation. It was that there was all kinds of problems with Tai Felton's routes, that he was jumping his pad, so he was tipping the route. He was not always precise with where he was breaking it off. He wasn't always crisp with that. He was, he was not rounding him off, but he was like bubbling up or he wasn't working back toward the quarterback when he was supposed to. So, you kind of bubble some of those routes and you carve it back down toward the quarterback. He wasn't doing that. And then just, It's with wide receivers. Sometimes it's what you're not doing too. There wasn't a lot of like stemming. There wasn't a lot of like super thought. It was just run to the spot and turn when you're supposed to. And in the NFL, that's sort of inadequate. So am I seeing more from all of that? There were so many problems with Tai Felton's routes. Like it wasn't surprising to me at all that he wasn't a factor from offense. If he became a guy that could be like viable in offense with the starters in games that count, that would represent a massive KJ Osborne style second year leap out of nowhere. It would be an awesomely impressive accomplishment to add that much to your game in just a few months of training in the offseason. It would be super cool. I would love to see it. That's one thing I'm looking for. And I don't really care if he catches the ball or gets targeted or not, right? If he gets open and it was a sack or something stupid happened with the court, like I don't care. I want to see the craft of route running and the challenges he's presenting to the cornerback. And even if he doesn't get separation, maybe the cornerback makes a great play. I want to see how hard he made it for that cornerback. And that's going to tell me a lot more about Tai Felton. And on the same side with Chuck Demmings, I don't need to see him make a bunch of plays. In fact, a game where he plays a bunch of reps and never gets targeted could be an elite one, right? As a corner, it means the guy never got open, right? And so with these guys, like I'm so excited to be able to actually break down a little bit of the tape. And I hope I can get my hands on it so I can look at it when I'm on a plane on Sunday. It'll be the day after. Sometimes the tape doesn't quite come out by then, but I'm going to try. So that's 2 young players I'm excited about. I kind of talked about Tai Felton too much, but I'll rapid fire through some of the other ones, right? We get to see Caleb Banks. We get to see Dominic Orange. What's going on with those guys? By the way, Justin Jefferson and Christian Darrisaw will not play on Saturday. It's possible Addison won't. I've heard differing things from differing reads on things from differing people. I'm not quite sure what the deal is, and I don't really care enough to look that deep into it. But some of those guys that you would be like, why would this guy ever play in the preseason? They're not going to play, but the vast majority of the rest of the ones will. But then we're going to get quite a lot of the Dominique Orange, Caleb Banks second team, which in that unofficial depth chart probably represents the depth chart they're going to use in this preseason game. And that would mean the rookies are going to play quite a bit in this preseason game, as they should. So we get to evaluate guys like that. And then Jake Golday. Jake Golday is the guy that like, I gotta see if this is real too, because this has been the other like big hype thing. And I don't know if people are talking about Jake Golday as like one of the stories of camp. And I think without the quarterback battle, we probably would have had it. But he's making a play every day. Like, it's very much like the Tai Felton thing, where he keeps being named as the guy who made a cool play, but that pattern hasn't gotten, I guess, the attention. Maybe it's just my ecosystem. Maybe I missed it and everybody wrote their puff piece, but it hasn't gotten the attention that I think it normally would have if we didn't all spend all of our breath and all of our ink on the quarterback battle. Probably getting a heavy dose of him. And if the twos match the unofficial depth chart that the Vikings put out, Ivan Pace next to him, which is another interesting question. And I actually have a lot of questions about the roster outside of looking at rookies and second-year players that will be answered, plus some position battles to watch. And I'm going to break those down, preview them all for you next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before the first pitch. If, for example, you just want to click Shohei Ohtani every day for this, you can do that every single day. He's like plus 210 usually, something like that, if you want to actually make the bet on the homer, or just pick him as your guy for Daily Dingers. If you're ready to play your game today, join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. Moving along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Hey, I'm on short form now. You can find me on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Instagram Reels at Luke Braun NFL on all of those social media platforms. And I'm making shorts mostly about the Vikings, but sometimes I'll dip in. I got a Joe Burrow one. I got a Cardinal Tate one coming out this morning, breaking down one of the cool fades that he had in camp like a week ago. But a lot of like Kyler Murray Viking stuff too. Anyways, position battles. So one of the whole story of camp has been about a position battle, right, at quarterback, but that one's over. And even if Kyler Murray has a rough couple of drives and J.D. McCarthy looks even better, they probably aren't going to reopen that Pandora's box. Not until the regular season actually has results they're dissatisfied with, and they are sent into a panic that requires them to reopen that Pandora's box, right? That would be my guess. That would be my hope. If not, they're just being indecisive, which I don't think anybody wants. So now we can focus on the other position battles. For example, one that has gotten basically no talk at all, and I've heard nothing either way about all of these tight ends. But Ben Urasek, Gavin Bartholomew, and I'll even throw Bryson Nesbitt in there, who's a second-year player. Who gets tight end 3? Will there be 4 tight ends, right? Everybody's bringing more tight ends nowadays. Are the Vikings going to do the same roster 4? Will it be something like that? How will these guys play? I don't know. Ben Urasek was listed above Gavin Bartholomew on the unofficial depth chart. That's also kind of a chalk way to do it because Urasek was, on the roster last year and Bartholomew was hurt, can't make the club in the tub, so now you got to re-earn your spot. But it is a very even footing to me. I feel like this is a football game that's 2 minutes in that is 0-0. And maybe somebody's got a couple yards, right? Like nothing has happened yet. And so the preseason, I think, will determine a lot of this. But maybe there's been a crazy pattern of play and there's already a lean one way or another that we just haven't been able to see because everybody was watching something else. One of the annoying things about how much this battle took up, right? But the preseason, even if one of them had a good camp, one of them had a bad camp, the preseason has the power to undo all of that anyways. You go have a bad preseason game and the other guy has a good preseason game, it can totally represent a switch in the fortunes of that battle. So those tight ends will be something to watch. And when you're watching a tight end, I implore you, this is not a box score thing. Of all the positions you should not evaluate in the box score, tight end is one of the most important ones to not make that mistake. Because tight ends are Swiss Army knives. They do a little of everything. So you have to pay attention on how they are when they're in the pass block. Are they getting enough on their chips, right? Are they getting a shot at people? Are they identifying the block correctly? Are they making the right blocks? Are they spacing their blocks properly? With their routes, you don't expect tight ends to be like shifty route runners, right? You don't need them to be crispy and break someone's ankles. They're big lumbering guys. Everybody is probably on the field is probably more agile than them except for the linemen. So rather, you're looking for precision in spacing. You're looking for them to do their job right. I just talked about wide receiver not necessarily being a spot where you just kind of want to hit your mark and turn when you're supposed to. Tight end kind of is with that route running. And whether the tight end gets the target or not is a factor of circumstance as much as anything. If you're the check down, you're not going to get a lot of volume unless there's pressure. And if you're a good chipper, you might be responsible for there not being much pressure and therefore no check down. And you're going to be happy about it because they just threw a bomb. So for a tight end, this is going to be another very important one to making a qualitative, not quantitative evaluation. Go with reasons, takeaways. You can have all the subjective opinions in the world about these guys. And I implore you to do just that. I encourage you to come up with a take that can be explained in an elevator, right? This guy is stronger. He gets better physical contact. He does all of these things. Aim for points that you cannot ascribe a stat to. And I promise you will have a better idea of these tight ends than someone who just looked up the receiving stats. Elsewhere in the position battles on offense, we got an interesting situation at guard. So Walter Rouse has apparently been moved to guard. I don't think he played there, or maybe he did and we just didn't hear about it. Maybe I missed it. If somebody saw it and said, oh, Walter Rouse at guard, here's an interesting thing in the first day, and I just missed it in the hullabaloo of the quarterback battle, let me know. Please tell me if I did that. Correct me. But I don't think he was doing that. And now he's been listed as a guard on that unofficial depth chart. Now, that thing could just be inaccurate. Because that thing doesn't have, that is not approved by Nolan Teasley. That thing could just be mistaken. Or it could mean that this is a thing they're trying because Caleb Tiernan has already taken that fourth tackle spot from Walter Rouse. A thing a lot of people expected to happen, by the way, just as a third-round pick. And maybe he's playing a little better. So there's another rookie to watch, right? Caleb Tiernan. That'll be interesting. He'll be the second-team right tackle protecting J.J. McCarthy. But at guard, now you have Walter Rouse, who will probably play fourth quarter with the threes. And is he going to outplay guys like Henry Bird or Joe Hubert? Henry Bird is there is an annual tradition of Henry Bird playing at camp, being with the twos. Maybe he makes the team this year and then just totally beefing it in the preseason. So if that happens again, there's an avenue for Walter Rouse to still stay on the 53-man roster, but it's not looking great for him. And maybe the most consequential battle here is outside. Well, I'll stay with the offense because the other one, I'll tease the more consequential battle. But the other one is Tai Felton and Miles Price versus kind of everyone else. There's a bit of a king of the hill thing there. Well, those guys are 4 and 5. Nobody's really stepped up enough to make you keep a sixth. And so maybe that helps you keep an extra running back. If, it's Xavier Scott and Damon Claiborne, there's another position battle for you. But you might keep both of those guys in a shoe or receiver because none of these undrafted guys have stepped up. So can anybody step up there and take Ty and Miles off of the hill, right? Can anybody knock off the kings of the hill? But let's move to defense because that's where the most consequential battle is. Jay Ward and Theo Jackson. Jay Ward listed above Theo Jackson in the initial depth chart. That is fascinating. Theo Jackson played a lot with the ones. Jay Ward rotated in. He played the Metellus role. They had Josh Metellus in the old Harrison Smith role. And a little bit of Jacoby Thomas mixing in, a little bit of course, Theo Jackson playing that his own role from last year. But if Theo Jackson is seen as a second teamer, he might be fighting for his life here. Now, I've kind of jumped on the Theo Jackson hate train a little bit, maybe a little bit too much. I of course, hope that I'm wrong about him and that we see a lot better play. But there were a lot of concerning issues on the tape last year that led him to get functionally benched or demoted, if you prefer, because he still got in here and there. And Jay Ward promoted. He got in more and more and more. So this trajectory is what we had going into camp, and it has continued. And now maybe Jay Ward is with the starters. Maybe he only plays a drive or two, like Kyler Murray and Will Fries will, right? Like those guys will be kind of in and out. And maybe Theo Jackson will be the same. Because the other thing about these guys that, like, whenever you see a guy that, like, was maybe a starter last year that kind of falls from grace and gets cut in the next camp, these surprise cuts, Alex Boone types, right? I always think of that Alex Boone situation. Remember that from it was 2017, I think. That's what we were all talking about in the 2017 season. Wow. Little did we know. But Alex Boone played with the ones that whole time. And then it kind of came out of nowhere because they knew what they had in him. And that's the deal with Theo Jackson, too. They know who they have in Theo Jackson. They've been with this guy for 4 years from now. So they know what's going on with him. They don't need to put him in the preseason and say, prove it, buddy. Like, they know, even if he has a great game in that one, it's not really going to overtake whatever you had for the rest of his time here in Minnesota. So if they feel as though somebody like Jacoby Thomas can take up the mantle, or if Jamal Adams can do a little more, or if an undrafted guy like Jacob Thomas can get in and be satisfactory depth, and you can cobble together a room that doesn't include Theo Jackson, keep the best four, he might not be on that list, considering how many mistakes I've seen just in the camp clips. Who knows how much more there is out there that I'm missing. Maybe the camp clips, because their offensive highlights are like skewed toward, misrepresenting the defense in a negative way. So I'll be aware of that as well. But that's what the preseason is for, right? This sort of this battle at safety. And I'm curious to see if they use Jamal Adams, or if they show how they're going to use Jamal Adams at all too. Or if he's going to be another guy in shorts as one of the old guys and standing next to, Christian Darrisaw and Jefferson and then all the other 30-somethings. There are a lot of questions that I have about the Vikings that don't have to do with evaluating singular players. That's the main thing of the preseason. Everybody is kind of on their own, individual track, and it's more about this guy versus that guy rather than this team versus that team when it's the preseason and the score doesn't matter. But there are still some questions that the Vikings won't be able to hide the answers to anymore, and that's what I'm curious about. I'll get into that next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Odoo. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. But that's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent, it's about having everyone working toward the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business. And even as you are trying to put together your 53-man roster, fit and chemistry becomes a big part of that, especially, the second team receivers chemistry with somebody like JJ McCarthy, who's working there. If we need backups to go in and everybody gets hurt, great organizations win because those operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Moving on. Some of the questions that I have going into this that I'm going to be really curious to answer, and I'll put them in your heads too. Help me answer them. Has nothing to do with who's better, with the who's who in the zoo, right? I'm asking about the what more than the who now. One of the big ones is the configuration of some of these hybrid positions. I'm talking about Eric Wilson, and then on the twos, I bet that's Jake Golday, or maybe Ivan Pace, maybe both. Jamal Adams, Metellus, Jay Ward. What is going to be the texture of these roles? We know the Brian Flores defense as something that moves guys around all the time. And, you're here, you're there, you're at nickel, on the outside, you play corner, you're back to safety, you're in the box as a linebacker type, you're on the edge blitzing. And a bunch of different guys will have jobs where they move about in that way. But what I'm curious is if I can notice at all any of the patterns in which, on this down and distance, they like to split Jamal Adams out, or Jamal Adams goes out, when it's 3-by-1 and they got a lot of space out on that side. Now you need somebody faster to go be one of those underneath defenders. So it's going to be a safety type rather than, a safety linebacker hybrid rather than like Blake Cashman. Or, if they go jumbo, are they going to take somebody like him off the field and replace him with a bigger linebacker? Maybe you're going to have Golday and Ivan Pace and Blake Cashman all on the field at the same time. Or maybe one of those guys is Eric Wilson. And, you're going to have like a 3 inside linebackers and 3 defensive tackles and like no edge rushers. Like, what are the weird packages you're going to see? You're not going to see much in the preseason. One thing I should probably mention about the preseason that I should kind of want to make a point to say every year is preseason games are always super vanilla in terms of their defenses. So I'm already seeing it happen, right? I'm recording this after the Steelers-Packers preseason game on Thursday, and Drew Aller is getting all this hype because he threw a couple of passes that were went yard because of Caden Weechin, who had this like crazy game. But he was like 11 for 14 and he's got 2 touchdowns and he had this crazy game. And again, you're looking at a stat line and it looks like a great stat line. Whoa, maybe this guy can do, well, let's see what he can do against the ones. He totally torched the twos. But then you look at it and you see a guy that's just executing some really kind of basic 101 concepts. They were in cover 3. We had a slant called. I had the hook defender in a bind and I read him. And it's like, okay, cool. You see that in high school. You've been seeing that forever. And the Packers have no problem with letting Drew Aller, dump 190 yards on him or whatever it was. I don't have the stat line in front of me. Because they're not going to show the types of defenses that they would show if they had the Steelers on the schedule and Drew Aller was going to start because of like injury to Aaron Rodgers or whatever. And, if they had all that, they would unleash some absolute nonsense and make Drew Aller look way worse, right? They would unleash something crazy. Jonathan Gannon probably would. And so it's going to be the same thing for the Vikings, that they're not going to reveal anything that isn't a staple. And that's useful context, not just to understand that, quarterback performance, if the defense really struggles and they can't cover anything and there's a lot of holes in the zone and passes get completed a lot. Well, they're in the most vanilla coverages ever. Don't sweat it. Don't get too crazy. Look at the individual who made a mistake, who spaced something out wrong, or did the quarterback just find the right spot? Did somebody run a great route and, you had to jump it and you just had and the right thing happened? You can evaluate individual performances who made a mistake, try to figure out what was supposed to happen and who didn't do what they were supposed to. But if you see, oh my God, the Giants put up 30 points on us and what I'm so concerned, is the depth bad? I don't ever really go there in the preseason because it's all so vanilla, right? Like if you had all those backups playing, Flores would dial up something different. And that's maybe one of the questions is what is a staple? Because what gets run in the preseason, you're going to skew it towards stuff that you're going to run so much game in and game out that kind of tipping this hand isn't really that important. It isn't really going to be that helpful. It's like trying to think of another sport where you want to work with deception and keep a secret. Maybe poker, right? And you bet big on double aces. You probably aren't going to care that much that everybody knew you bet big on double aces. You had double aces. Everybody does that. Maybe not everybody. I don't know the poker meta. Maybe you slow play double aces. That's probably what you want to do, right? You slow play double aces. Everyone's going to do that. It's not actually going to be valuable information if that part gets out. But if you have a specific situation, you have this hand, they have that hand, you've got to read on it, and you're going to, play a very way unique to you, maybe you're going to keep that a little bit closer to the chest. And the same thing goes for the preseason. So for Brian Flores, what is a staple? Are we going to see that all-up presentation? I mean, they do it all the time, right? Are we going to see that in the preseason, or are they going to holster what they're doing with it? Are we going to see some of their, palmsy coverages? Are we going to see them run that a whole bunch? Are we going to see them run that off man? Are we going to see more cover 3, more split field, cover 6? Like, what are we going to see? What do they view as the basic day one install staple that is the context in which they want to evaluate all of these players? That's a curiosity to me. And then you go back to, what does that mean for a guy like Jake Golday? How is he going to get used? Is he just going to play off-ball linebacker all day and just be in kind of a vanilla, 5-yard alignment and just kind of play in the box and do the thing? Because you're not using the interesting packages that you drew up for him yet? Or will they rove him around? Will they try to see what they can and can't get away with him? Will they try to practice with him on the edge and, get a bunch of experience, or are they going to try to keep it more of a secret? How the depth chart is going to go at D tackle is another one. That's another position battle I didn't really talk about. But how that's going to go, I imagine they're going to be in a lot of base. They've listed veterans as the starters. In this case, it was Levi Drake Rodriguez, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, and Jalen Redmond. If that's your first team group on week 1, I'm ringing the bell to evacuate the ship. That is not a good group if that is your start. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins is not an every down starter. Levi Drake Rodriguez, I've gained a little more respect for just in rewatching a lot of this stuff, especially as I was doing Jalen Redmond content, and Levi was next to him a lot, and I noticed a lot of plays from him. I get it. There is absolutely something there that's great for a rotational player, but as an every down starter, I would be deeply concerned. Jalen Redmond's the only one I don't have any problem with. He should be on the field 100% of the plays until he gets tired. And of course, we drafted 2 rookies. If they're backups, if they're not ready to go in, that would be a bummer. So how is that rotation going to work? And how do guys, this is the real curiosity, how do guys like Isaiah Loudermilk and Elijah Williams and Taki Taimani jump into that? Isaiah Loudermilk is a perennially rosterable player. He has been a guy on the Steelers team, taken for granted, rotational dude for them for years and years. He didn't make it into a lot of 53-man roster projections, including mine, just because that's a crowded room and we already have so many guys that are chalk for us that the newcomer that's not like a big name isn't going to register on anybody's Richter scale. But how is he going to go in? And is he going to be able to earn that spot over a guy like Elijah Williams or Taki Taimani, who are these young players we've been excited about in the past? I'm very curious about a lot of that scheme stuff and usage stuff, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to be live right at 000 right here on Locked On Vikings YouTube. And then we're going to have the squad show right after that. So a bunch of live instant reaction content right away. So come on down right on Saturday after the game is over. I will see you all for that. And as always, Skull.